Well, this is going to be the last episode for the Calibrated Scale of Consciousness talks that I've been giving. This is part number 6. And just to refresh, if you haven't, if you're just jumping on now wondering what the heck this Calibrated Scale of Consciousness is, this is basically an image of it. And it was designed by a gentleman by the name of David Hawkins, Dr. David Hawkins. He wrote a book called Power versus Force. And it talks about in that book, it talks about the level of primary emotional output that an individual vibrates at. Every emotion that we have has a frequency depending on where that emotion is on the scale of consciousness. If that is your primary emotional state. So it doesn't mean that somebody who, for example, their primary emotional state is anger, doesn't mean that they never experience happiness or that they never experience joy or they never experience grief or any of these other ones. It just means that that's their primary state that they go to. So last time, episode 5, we left off with reason and love, and those are two of the higher calibrating emotional or vibrational states, frequencies. And we're going to be going, and I talked a little bit about the barrier of moving into the realm of love and why that's so difficult for so many people to cross over. And again, when we're talking about love, we're talking about, on the scale, which goes from 1 to 1,000, we're talking about love, which is near the very top towards enlightenment, vibrates at only half way up the scale at 500. Now again, these numbers are kind of arbitrary. It's the relationship between the numbers that really matters. In the early stages, we were taking leaps of about 10, 20, 25 points from one vibrational frequency, emotional frequency to the next. Now we're looking at jumps of much higher. We're looking at jumps of even upwards of 100 points between two different frequencies. Hold on one second. Very loud motorcycle going by. Apologize. Thought it would be nice and quiet out here in the afternoon on my front porch. Not so much. Anyway, we are leaving love and we're moving up into joy. And that is a jump from 500 to 540. So not that big of a jump. It's one of the shorter jumps near the upper end of the scale. It was a larger jump going from reason, which vibrates at 400, into love, which vibrates at 500. And again, that's why that barrier is there and why it's harder, so much harder for somebody to transition into the capacity of living from the perspective of love in all things that they do. So joy, when we move up into joy, vibrating in the mid 500s, these are people that when this is their primary emotional frequency, these are individuals that we look at as being like saints, right? Or people that are extremely advanced spiritually. Gandhi is an example of someone that's fairly advanced spiritually, or was fairly advanced spiritually. And but the others that we're looking at are like Buddha, Krishna, Jesus. These are all individuals that we would revere as these saints. Saint Francis of Assisi is a great example of someone that lived his life from the perspective of joy. In this state, love becomes more and more unconditional. So even though we're leaving, going above, moving up in scale from love into joy, there's still a lot of love that is a part of this level at this scale. And there's no personal tragedy or world event, regardless of how heinous or regardless of how disastrous, that is capable of permanently shaking somebody out of joy. It might, again, you might move temporarily into grief or anger. If it's, like a genocidal type event or something, and yeah, you're going to get angry about that. It's not like you're happy about everything when you move into joy. It's that your primary state is always returning back to joy. You see your life as being perfectly aligned or in perfect harmony with the will of the divine, the powers that created you and your own personal powers. These are all they're in harmony. They move together. You see your every action you take. You see the bigger picture that action plays. And these are individuals that really are an inspiration to a wide range of people. They're an inspiration to everybody that they come in contact with. And then moving up from joy, the last vibrational state that we reach before we move into the realm of enlightenment is that of peace. And this is that peace that passes understanding that it talks about in the Bible. It's also referred to as samadhi. This is that state of we haven't reached enlightenment. You're going to be having more and more experiences and enlightened experiences and operating more from enlightened perspectives. But your primary emotional frequency at this point is that of peace. And this is when we do a complete surrender to the divine. We are just we see the hand of God in everything that we do. We see our connection with universal intelligence. We see that every step that we take, every action we take, we understand down 4, 5, 6, 7 degree separation from us. We can see where our actions are touching people. And it's the ultimate of altruism, living at the state of peace. Self-sacrifice for the benefit of mankind, for the benefit of greater mankind. You don't even give it a second thought. You just move into that. Only 1 in about 10 million people ever reach this state. Now, again, this doesn't mean you can't feel the state from time to time. Deep meditation, maybe on a meditation retreat, take a week-long or 2-week-long retreat. You can enter into this state, but this state is hard to maintain if you are not vibrating at that level on a consistent basis. So only about 1 in 10 million ever reach the state where they live in this state. But the good thing is that those people that do reach that state, each one of them can offset the destructive energies of 10 million people who are living at the level of 200 and below. And remember, when we look at 200, that's the level of courage. That was that first barrier when we moved from the contracted emotional states or the levels of consciousness into expanded consciousness. The barrier there between pride and courage. So one person can migrate or can move the emotional energies, can offset the destructive emotional energies of 10 million people who live below the level of courage. And that's just really, really cool. Now, above here, peace goes from 600 to 700, and then everything above that is just a state of enlightenment. And that's really where we want to be. So, get the book. Study this stuff. It's important to know. The more you know about it, the easier it is for you to move from one level to the next. And we'll talk to you soon.